Are we ready? Okay. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this project of oral narratives of Latinos in Ohio. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2020. Can we start with your full name, please?
Lisa Paul.
Okay. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I was born in 1977, and I grew up in San Juan in a little suburb called Rio Piedras. And that's where I was raised until the age of 17 when I came to Ohio.
Okay. Where in Ohio did you
I started in Dayton. I went to University of Dayton. I came straight from graduating high school to college, and I came to UD, and that's where I met my husband, and that's where my my life started here in Ohio.
Great.
So yes.
Yeah. Tell me about your childhood in San Juan. What was your daily life like?
So I was raised by two physicians, and I have an older brother, so I'm the youngest of two, and went to Catholic school, was able to run around my neighborhood, made a lot of girlfriends in the neighborhood. I will leave the house in the morning, and I wouldn't come back until the evening. Couldn't play sports so we just hang out and I just faked it, and I was great at conversation and hanging out, so I was able to create a good group of neighbors. My school started with private education, graduated from private education, had church. I went to a Baptist school, Baptist church when I was little. I was raised on the First Baptist Church of Coupé, the little suburb in Rio Piedras, and attended church all the way to the age of 17. My family, my mom was Catholic and she converted into Baptist. She became a Protestant, and my dad was a Protestant. So my childhood, my grandma, my mom's mom was the one that was around us the most. Both of my parents will leave early and come home late. So my mom's parents were the ones that will pick us up and take us to piano lessons, will pick us up and take us to tutoring, will make us dinner and make sure that everything was done before mom and dad came from work. We were already fed, already took a shower, and so they were the ones that grounded us, or will hit us con la correa if we didn't follow what we needed to do, and will force us to take siestas, and it was something extremely special that I miss, that my children don't have that, because the grandparents are not very close. But yeah, I think my value system came from that side of the family significantly.
What things do you remember doing with your brother?
Oh gosh, arguing all the time. But what we love, my brother and I, the times that we used to get along the best was when we would go on vacation. We were forced to be with each other. So we used to go to Disney all the time. We went skiing a few times, and our parents took us to Europe to see where they went to medical school. They both graduated from medical school in Spain, so they took a trip after they got married, and their honeymoon, it was like 21 days. They just took a car and just went from city to city in Europe, and they wanted their children to experience that, so we did it. We were 21 days in the car, and they took us through their honeymoon trip, and those are the fondest memories that we have. A lot of jokes from that trip.
Right. Are you the only one from the family that lives here in Ohio?
No, my brother came before me in 1991. He came to college, went to Ohio Dominican, Ohio State, went back to Puerto Rico, lived in Puerto Rico for a little bit, and after getting his degree in medicine, he settled here in Columbus. So we're both here, the two of us. He wants to be around the nephews, so we're glad to have him around.
Of course, of course. What memories do you have of your parents or your grandparents activities doing activities with them. It could be traditions, maybe. It sounds like your grandparents were very active in your guys' lives. So tell me about some of the things that you did, aside from the chores and the things that you had to do.
It goes back into religion. It goes back into religion because my dad's side being Baptist and my grandma was Catholic and my mom converted to being Baptist. So I learned that my grandma practiced espiritismo. So she will have ladies come over every day, first thing in the morning, and they will go to the back room and they will spend an hour back there and they will come out and they'll thank my grandma. And I loved it that people just kept coming in and out. It was nonstop. Saturday mornings, the flower lady will walk by and my grandma will buy new flowers for her saint. Her saint was Saint Barbara, and she will bring like flowers and she will bring apples and she will bring all these things to Saint Barbara. So there was a lot of things happening in my grandma's house, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. We needed to behave. If we didn't behave, we would get in trouble. So I make sure of that. I try to kind of be a fly in the wall, kind of just blend in, but always observing. I think that makes me a good social worker now. But those are the fondest memories, especially on New Year's Eve. She will have this huge party, and there was a lot of dancing and a lot of drumming, and everybody was dressed in white with their red belt. And I remember as a little kid, it was a lot of fun stuff happening, and I felt like I was part of something, that there was something happening, and I'm in the middle of it. One of the things that my grandma used to do, I'll never forget, is that she used to bless us every time we would get on an airplane. She will make us take a shower. We had to take a bath full of flowers and different smells. To this day, I can't find them. You used to buy them in a botanica back in Puerto Rico, and then she will bless our feet and put a chalk and a cross on our feet to bless us so we could go and have a safe trip but be able to come back. So there was a lot of superstitious things that she did that will make me feel, okay, I'm protected now. Things are going to be fine.
Was that ever any source of tension between your parents?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a lot of drama because my dad's side were completely religious and very conservative. And he married this wife that his mom has all this mysticism, Catholic, part of the Catholic religion. So yeah, there was a lot of contention up there, and my mom was able to navigate it in the most beautiful way. Now that I'm an adult, I'll look back and I look at it and I'm like, wow, she was really good at dealing with these tricky situations. But at the same time, she was proud of what she came from, and we were able to blend it all in to make us who we are today.
That's a great way to put it. Especially because then you said both of them are doctors, right?
Yes.
So then there's the science component.
It's fascinating, yes. And to see, my dad was very conservative religious-wise, but then he was one of the first doctors in Puerto Rico to learn acupuncture and to learn homeopathic medicine. So it's just fascinating.
Right. Yes. How we live in this.
Yes, it's all blended, yes.
So you speak Spanish?
Yes, that's my first language.
Okay. How was it transitioning into Ohio, where you don't hear Spanish, or you didn't, especially in the 90s, when you moved to Dayton? How was that initial transition to the language, especially?
It was very difficult, and I might get a little tearful here. It was very difficult because I had to translate everything. So I would sit in a classroom, and there was an English class, and I had to process all the information and translate it from English to Spanish. So I was always behind compared to all my peers in the classroom. Socially, I could cover it up, but it was very difficult because I had to work extra hard to catch up with everybody else that their first language was English. But my husband showed up after 1 year, and a boy from Canton, Ohio. Couldn't be any more American if you met him. And him and his best friends, we met them one summer, and him and his best friend just embraced me and my roommate, Natasha. And as much as they wanted to learn Spanish, they wanted to teach me the language. And every time I will be with them, I will say something wrong and they will correct me. And every time I will go to a restaurant and I will order something, they'll be like, Lisa, you got to say it this way. Like, they didn't cut me any slack. They wanted to make sure that I came across in the correct way and that I expressed myself correctly, because they knew I was smart. So they wanted to make sure that I looked smart. And they enjoy our company. And I remember when I finally fell in love with my husband, I was in the dorm and I got a Valentine's Day card, and I didn't know what to write because all the feelings were in Spanish and he was American. And I'm like, how am I going to write this? Like, I don't want to say I love you, but I want to say te quiero. So it was, it was really interesting to navigate the te quiero and te amo with I love you. You only say I love you, right? I care for you. That sounds bizarre. So he was the one, and to this day, he's the one that helps me learn the language and be as successful as I am today because of his patience and his commitment and his love.
Thank you for sharing that. But Spanish is also part of who you are, right?
Yes.
Speaking the language. How
Yes.
are you also able to keep that in you and your children? You have children?
Yes. So I feel like I did really well with my firstborn, and he's able to understand and he speaks the language without an accent. Not a lot, but he can defend himself. I feel like I did a disservice to my second son because I didn't force it. You're exhausted as a parent, so it's easier just to talk to the whole family in English. So what I try to do is to embrace my culture with the language, but with the food. And we try to cook as many Latino dishes as possible, and we work on the pronunciation. And we try to tell them, you are Puerto Rican, even though you're born here and you're half American, you are Puerto Rican, and this is who you are, and you have to embrace it. And they love it. They love going to Puerto Rico. So that's another thing. We see the cousins when we go home, and we haven't been home since 2016 because of Hurricane Maria. Once Hurricane Maria came, the family came to visit us so they could have warm water and electricity. And then we were supposed to go this summer, and COVID happened. The pandemic happened. So they haven't been home in 4 years. And I think that has been the most difficult thing for them, that they're ready to go back to their roots and feel that they're at home. So we work hard on it.
Aside from the initial experience of learning English fluently so that you could be successful in the university and professionally, do you remember any experiences that were particularly good or bad with language? And it could be maybe you speaking Spanish in public, or trying to communicate in English, and people maybe not being as friendly because you were not a native English speaker.
I think it happens to me all the time, every day. I'm in leadership positions. I'm a director at my job, and I have a team that I supervise. And you can hear there's different words that are a little bit more difficult to pronounce. So you hear my team giggle because I didn't pronounce it correctly. And they're like, oh, it is so cute. Please, boss, say it again. We want to hear it again. So to them, they find it that is cute. To me, it's like, I don't want to come across as cute. I want to come across as who I am. And I want them not to listen to my accent. I wanted to listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. So it is a challenge. Also, I'm the president for my kids' school board. And you see it when I'm communicating with them and getting my thoughts across. It's a challenge sometimes because I will probably translate a word from Spanish to English, and it might be the same word, but it doesn't have the same definition. So I have to be very careful, and in Puerto Rico, we tend to speak very fast. So I need to learn to speak slower in English so I can get all my thoughts across and get the pronunciation correctly. But it's a challenge. It is a challenge to do that all the time.
Have you always felt comfortable speaking Spanish though in Ohio with friends or with family?
Absolutely. There hasn't been a time that I have felt uncomfortable. When I see a Latino, my first words are in Spanish, and they say, "Oh no, I don't speak English," and I said, "I don't speak Spanish," and I'm like, "Oh, don't worry, you're still Latino," and then we'll start talking in English. Especially at work, I make a point that I approach all the Latinos that I know. I approach them in Spanish. I want them to know that you don't need to be judged. You're not talking about other people. You're just saying hi to each other in your language and the language that you were raised. So I try to make people around me comfortable when I see them, and you can see the fear. They're like, should I talk to you in Spanish? Should I talk to you in English? I always approach them in Spanish. And then if somebody's coming in that does not understand the language, we switch to English out of courtesy and respect for that person.
I usually ask if the interview, if you would like to do it in Spanish and English, and I didn't ask you.
Podemos hablar en español también, no importa.
Podemos cambiar.
Sí, cambiamos.
No pregunté. So again, feel free to answer in any language that you want.
Okay.
Tell me about the first memories that you have of Ohio, of moving here. You say your brother was here already, but you went to Dayton, which is a small town in Ohio. It's grown a lot, but in the 90s, we're still...
My first memory was going into my dorms and see all the girls rushing for the sorority. That was the most bizarre environment. I think it's rush week, and that was the most, to me, to them, it was what they have been looking forward their entire graduation. They're like, graduation, rush week. That's and to me it was very bizarre to see them go through that whole process, and me as a bystander just standing back and watching it and observing it and trying to be excited for them. And they asked me, they're like, why aren't you rushing? And I had a very strong belief of sororities or fraternities. My dad was part of one when he was in college. My mom was not part of that. She did the ROTC a little bit, the godmothers of ROTC. Las madrinas del ROTC, that's what she did in the university. So to me, I just didn't find something that I wanted to do. Yo encontré mi grupo de latinos y era nuestro grupo de latinos y me defendí con ellos. Yo diría me defendí con ellos como por el primer año. Like during my entire freshman year, yo era con los latinos todo el tiempo, hasta que conocí el grupo de amistades de mi esposo y conocí y me hice más close de una de las puertorriqueñas, Natacha, en el campus, and she started to introduce me to American friends, and that's when I separated myself from the Latinos and just started hanging out with this new group of American friends. But that was the first thing that it was shocking to me. Y la otra cosa fue la cantidad de alcohol, the amount of alcohol that the girls drank compared to us. I've been drinking since I was 14. So these girls were like drinking in amounts that I never seen before, and their behaviors, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, I did this when I was a lot younger. Like, so that was interesting to see them at 18 going through something that I went through when I was like 15, 16 years old.
You lived on campus? Is that right?
Yeah, the first 2 years I did.
What kind of jobs have you had here in Ohio?
My first job at UD was in the cafeteria. And I was making the baked potatoes, and I was getting the cookies ready, and I made the best baked potato for my friends. And then after that, one of my Latina friends had a job at the library. And I was like, oh my God, And my mom was like, you got to do what you need to do. You need that job. And I'm like, okay. So they hire us for the summer. And then one of my floor mates was also working there, had worked there the entire time. She loved books. She's now like my best friend from college. It's awesome. So me and her worked the summer, and then I got hired for the fall. And then I got my husband to get a job at the library. I got my roommate to get a job at the library. I'm like bringing everybody in because it was such a great environment for you to balance going to school. But at the same time, you had a really group, close-knit adults that love you and embrace you and will make you part of their own family, even though that was their work. So that was some of the jobs that I did. I went to St. Clair Community College in Dayton. So I was the secretary for the counseling department when I was taking courses there. Then I went to Wright State University, and that's where I graduated with my bachelor's of social work. And there I was the secretary for the math department. And I was able to get a job through St. Clair. They were giving out some scholarships to students, especially minorities, and I was able to get a job at Wright-Patt Air Force Base. And I was like a clerk with medical records in the basement with a bunch of airmen, and I'm the only like civilian there, and that was so much fun. Being the only civilian among all the military personnel, and they wanted to hire me. I remember calling my mom and saying, Mom, I got a full-time job, a federal full-time job. She's like, no way. You are there to go to school, not to get a federal job.
That's good.
So I'm like, okay, never mind. It's a great pay. And she's like, no, you are there to go to school. They were always stickler about school. They're like, you have to finish school before you plan anything else. That's the only thing we're going to leave you. And it was always, not going to leave you money. The only thing we're going to leave you is an education. So you got to take advantage of it.
Right,
So.
right. And you went to graduate school as
I
well?
did. So when I finished my bachelor's degree, one of my teachers, I was going to take a year off and come to Ohio State, become a Buckeye, and get my master's degree here. So my boyfriend back then, not my husband, decided to get a second degree. So he came to Ohio State to do wildlife management. So I said, okay, well, I will take a year off and I will go and get my master at Ohio State, and we will live happily ever after. And God has a different plan. When I was on my graduation, one of the teachers at Wright State said to me, are you sure you want to take a year off? Are you sure you want to go to Ohio State? And I said, yes. So I didn't hear from her until probably July. And she's like, I don't like your plan. She's like, I'm going to get my Ph.D. at Case Western, and I already talked to them about you, and you have been admitted to Case Western. And you have 2 weeks to apply. And they have a space for you already, and I think it's too late for scholarships, and I think it's too late for loans, but we'll figure it out. But they have a seat for you at Case. So you have 2 weeks to move to Cleveland. And she said, and she's like, and you're in the advanced program, so you're gonna be going to school for an entire year. And I'm like, I didn't even apply. So that's another angel. I had angels all over Ohio, wherever I went. My parents weren't there, but I had little angels that followed me and made me feel at home. It was amazing. And this teacher changed my entire career, because I know that once I went to Case, I knew I was going to be set, that I was able to get my internship at the Cleveland Clinic. And after we did get my master's degree, I was able to come back to Columbus. And
So were you separated for a year?
yeah, we used to see each other like every other weekend. I would come down with my cat. I would come down with my cat every 2 weeks. It would come down every other week. I lived in a basement of a building. I think there was black mold in the entire apartment. The lady across the hallway was the maintenance lady. It was a black woman with two daughters, with two granddaughters, and her daughter was in the armed forces. So she was raising the girls. So those girls became like my nieces. Like I took them Halloween, and then my husband will come to visit, and she will make collard greens for my husband. So my husband was introduced to all type of Southern food by her, and she became another angel. And it got me through my master's degree, so then I could settle here in Columbus.
How was that year living in Cleveland? And did you know that there were some significantly larger Puerto Rican community when you were there?
No, I did not. My dad kept saying that I needed to go to Lorraine. He's like, I have a bunch of patients in Lorraine. You got to go to Lorraine. And I'm like, I don't know where Lorraine is. Like, I'm afraid. Like, my car is going to fall apart. Like, I can go from my apartment to class, and from class to my apartment. I will make it to Columbus, but it might not be a good idea. And so he bought me a car for grad school. Once he knew that I was admitted, he was like, okay, you need a car. So he got me a car. I still never made it to Lorraine. But I had a job. I had a part-time job at Case Western under the Center for Urban Poverty. And I was interviewing Latinas that had home daycares in their neighborhood on the west side. So that's how I was introduced to the Latino community on the west side. And I will go to their houses. I will sit down with them, and they were all paranoid because they're like, is it going to be an American that is going to come in, and what type of questions are they going to ask me? So having somebody the same culture sit down with them and same language and reassure them and have a really good conversation with them. That's how I was introduced to the Latino culture on the west side. But I lived on the east side. So I had a huge Jewish influence there in Shaker Heights, and a black, heavily black community there. So it was fantastic. It was very difficult because I was in a basement, so it was very depressing. Probably I had a little bit of depression my first 2 months, but it was great.
That's good.
No regrets.
Right. And then after that, you came back, or you moved
And then
to
I
Columbus?
yes, I got a job offer at the Cleveland Clinic right after grad school, and I said no because of love.
Because of love.
And I just packed up and came back here and was completely unemployed in German Village, out of Brownstone, and told my mom I was burned out. I needed 6 months of a break. She gave me 6 months of a break. And then September 11 happened. So I was not working during September 11, and I was able to watch all of that and be part of all of that. And then I was able to get a job at a Jewish hospice, and that was my first social work job.
So you got married eventually, and you have stayed here in Columbus all this time. And you have two sons, is that right?
I do. I have Dominic, that is 12, and Luca, that is 9.
Okay. Tell me about raising Latino children here in Columbus. And you mentioned a little bit that, what you've tried to do with the language. Tell me more about how you try to keep the culture alive and their connection and the way, a way for them to feel proud of being Puerto Rican or Latino.
It's hard. It is so easy because I have been here longer than being in Puerto Rico. It is so easy to just go with the flow. It is very hard. You reach out to some Latino friends, and you try to find Latino friends that are in the same circumstances. Because what I have found is people that are newly migrated, they don't find you that you're Latino enough. So that's difficult. So I try to find other Latinos that are in similar circumstances as mine, that they have been here for many years or were born and raised here but have a very strong Latino background, and making sure that my kids see the children. We usually socialize the most at the crew games for soccer. That's where I find that the boys are interacting with more Latinos, and in their teams, in their sport, they love to play soccer, so they make a point. I'm like, Mama, I think they're Mexican. And I'm like, good. You go out and you talk to them, and you talk to them in Spanish. So it's just it's just for them, letting them know that it is okay and be proud of who you are. I think a lot of conversation with the family in Puerto Rico helps.
Do your parents visit here?
Yes, yes. My mom passed away, but my dad remarried, and my dad's wife has become the children grandmother. She's the abuela, period. And she adores them, and they come to visit. We tried to go there one year, and then they come the other, but for the past 4 years, they have been coming every year, Thanksgiving or the holidays. Or birthdays.
What kind of things do they do with them when they come? Is there any traditions?
Oh, wow. Yes. Abuela makes the best cremita. There is no cremita that can be made better than Abuela. They asked me to make it, and they're like, no, Abuela cremita is much better. We go to ice cream. We make sure we get ice cream with them, and just lay down. Like, my dad loves to watch ESPN, so my youngest one just lays by my dad and just watches ESPN with him, and they can do that all day. They just talk about sports all day. We make a point of cooking a lot of Latino food, like we make arroz con gandules and all of that, and they just love it. They love the Latino cuisine, so especially Puerto Rican. They're like, arroz con gandules, can we have that every day? I'm like, that's for holidays. They're like, no, we want arroz con gandules every day. So
What do you mean holidays? I would
Yes.
have it every day too.
yes. So there's a lot of things that they do. I try to make sure that we do outings, like we'll go to Amish country so we can spend an entire day together. And one time we took them to blueberry picking because there's no blueberry picking in Puerto Rico. So we tried to give them a different experience that they might have in Puerto Rico, and the boys love giving them the tour
Showing
and
them.
showing them about it. Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great. So Lisa, we are in the middle of a pandemic. This is the summer of 2020, and we're going through this, through these times. Quería preguntarte, ¿cómo te enteraste? Yo sé que eres una profesional, pero quiero que pienses en el proceso de aprender sobre la pandemia y tu reacción inicial sobre esto.
Yo trabajo para un hospital, para un sistema de hospitales, que cuando todo esto empezó fue como un relajo, porque las enfermeras, las trabajadoras sociales, nosotros decíamos, esto es otro virus, nosotros estamos acostumbrados a influenza, nosotros estamos acostumbrados a bregar con lo que sea. Eso era un chiste. Yo te diría las primeras 2 semanas era un chiste. Y una de mis enfermeras retiradas me llamó y me dijo, mira que estoy haciendo mascarillas, que si necesitan mascarilla, y yo, mascarilla, no se necesitan mascarilla, esto es otro virus, ¿de qué tú estás hablando? Esa fue mi reacción, completamente negación. Estoy trabajando en un sistema de hospitales, nosotros somos los expertos, nosotros sabemos lo que estamos haciendo, no nos tenemos que preocupar. Yo diría como en la 3ª semana que empezaron los casos a subir en Estados Unidos, que empezamos a escuchar lo que estaba diciendo el World Health Organization, lo que estaba diciendo en los briefings Dr. Fauci, y ahí fue que como que empezó la ansiedad a subir. Y mi primera reacción fue, yo tengo que tener mi equipo en su casa, mi equipo no puede estar en la oficina. Tengo una empleada que está pasando por cáncer de seno, que está recibiendo radiación, ella tiene que estar en su casa porque she's immunocompromised. Tengo otro empleado que el hijo está pasando por cáncer pediátrico, que está recibiendo quimioterapia. Tengo que coger a mi equipo y que se vayan todos para la casa. So empezamos a bregar con las computadoras, los llevamos todos para la casa. Fue el día antes que it was like the stay-at-home order. So I got them out on Friday. I think the stay-at-home order was going to start on Monday. Entonces, después de eso fue, los niños. Vamos a estar en casa. Yo voy a trabajar en casa, mi esposo va a trabajar en casa. ¿Dónde tú vas a trabajar? ¿Dónde van a trabajar los niños? ¿Dónde va a trabajar mi esposo? Y ahí fue que empezó la ansiedad. No fue con lo de mi equipo. Con lo de mi equipo, I can deal with the stress. No problem. When I was at home, and all of a sudden I'm working in a whole different environment, and I don't have my 8 to 10 hours a day to getting my work done. There's children in my house that need that are confused. They're confused. They're like, what is this? What are we supposed to do? They're scared. They're anxious because they know that it's something outside that can kill them. I think that was the first fear that everybody had. So nobody wants to go outside. Everybody wants to stay outside. Dad is the one that goes and gets the groceries. I was petrified. I was completely petrified. I didn't want to leave the house. I think I went to Piatas with the family about 3 weeks afterwards, and my husband was like, "You are not allowed to leave the house again." I was yelling at the kids because one dropped the spoon. I'm like, "Don't get it!" Yes. And there was a gentleman that was going to order food, and he wasn't wearing a mask, and I'm yelling at the kids, "Move this way." Like, it was a total disaster. I'm like, all I wanted to go was to Piatas and get carry out. We weren't going to even eat it there. And I remember crying in the car. And the boys are like, "Why are you crying?" And my husband is like, "I don't think you should be leaving the house." So I remember, like, I'm like, I'm not going to last. Like, I need to call my doctor. And she was like, you need to breathe. You need to breathe. I'm going to give you supplements so you can calm down, and you're going to take these supplements, and there's magnesium and calcium, and you're going to be okay. And I'm like, okay, I will take these. I go to a homeopathic doctor, and it's very easy to say, okay, we're going to start you in Zoloft and you're going to be just fine. But you want to find out there's other methods before you resort to that. So she was able to do that. I started running. My best friend, I'm like, we got to run. If we're stuck here, we got to run. So I went into like a different coping mechanisms, not just one. Everybody else around me were drinking. So I noticed the first few weeks, my husband and I were drinking a lot, and we were like, oh no, we got to stop. So we gave ourselves a rule that we would only drink on Fridays and on Saturdays, and that's it. Because everybody else around us were like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. If I got to get through the homeschooling, this is how we're going to do it. So we kept each other in check. And I would say probably about a month ago, I finally realized, okay, it's been 7 months. It's been 7 months. I don't know how long this is going to last. I need the stamina to get through whatever is coming. And I started meditating. And I'm like exercising, taking my supplements, and I'm meditating. And I said, I think I finally found my coping mechanisms to get through COVID.
Healthy.
That I've never done before. Like, I always exercise, but to be so conscientious of you have to do this so you can survive the pandemic and be functional and raise kids and teach them if the schools shut down again, what are you going to do? So I feel like I'm there.
So you mentioned some of the initial sort of logistics of where is everybody going to be in the house and the work, where's everybody's workstation and things like that. Tell me some of the things that you did as a family too to cope. So you mentioned some of the things that you did, for yourself. How were you able to also help like your younger children? And
there was a lot of crying. I think after the children will go to bed, my husband and I will like sit down and we cried. Like we just cried because we knew we noticed not so much the oldest one, because the oldest one could Xbox and talk with his friends through the Xbox and stay connected. But we noticed that our youngest one, he was 8 then, you can start seeing him socially withdrawing himself and socially not being himself and not wanting to engage. And that was scary. I have never been scared like that. Like, oh my gosh, I'm raising a human being and I'm seeing this human being having some mental health issues in front of me, and I don't know if I have control over it. So we started scheduling Zoom dates with his friends, and it was funny because not funny, but it was funny because the other parents were like, thank you, yes, we need to engage them. So we started scheduling Zoom dates, and it just like that, he was back in business. Like he was back to normal, engaged again, fine. So we made a point of keeping him engaged with his circle of friends. We all had a circle of friends, and we cut his. His was shut down completely once he couldn't be with his friends. And they play football every day in recess, and they play soccer every day in recess. And all of a sudden, he was thrown off. So that was something.
Right. ¿Tú crees que el gobierno nos ha proveído la información necesaria para entender esta situación y para tomar las medidas necesarias para cuidarnos hasta
No,
ahora?
no. I believe that it has become a political and financial decision-making process. I don't think that we have listened to the experts. And once it became political, because the economy started tanking and the businesses started to lose money, I think that we switched the decision making into we got to reopen instead of keeping everybody safe. We got to reopen instead of thinking what are we going to do with the people that are immunocompromised. We got to reopen. So I think that we could have done a better job of being more proactive. You know, you do reading and you learn that we first heard about this back in November. You read about it, and during the holidays it was here. Like my kid was really, really sick. New Year, I think it was a few days before New Year's Eve, like really sick. And you wonder, I'm like, did he had COVID? Because this kid never gets sick. He doesn't have colds or anything like that, but he showed the symptoms of COVID. I'm like, could he have COVID? And we didn't know. And then you hear about other people at work. There were so many people were sick in January and February, and all of them were negative to the flu. And then this happens in March, and we're like, wait a minute. Could all these people at my workplace had COVID and I didn't know about it? So I think we could have been a little bit more proactive. There were a lot of countries that were extremely aggressive. And like Spain is a country that is not doing financially well, but they shut everything down because they had so many cases. And after they shut everything down and they were able to get everything under control, then they started to reopen slowly. And I think that there's some cases that are happening here and there, but they don't need to shut down completely. It's just sad that we weren't that proactive back in December, back in January. I think we would have been in a different space than we are now in August. People didn't know what to do. You watch YouTube, you watch Facebook. Again, at the beginning, I didn't think that masks were necessary until like Dr. Fauci was like, you need to wear a mask. And Dr. Acton was like, you need to wear a mask. And I'm like, oh, Dr. Acton said I got to wear a mask. I'm wearing a mask. You're wearing a mask. We need masks everywhere. So I started buying masks for my patients to make sure our patients were elderly. Our members for the insurance company, they're elderly. So my staff kept saying they need masks. So we had one nurse, I paid her for the fabric and everything, and she made masks for them, and we mailed it to them so they could have masks. So, you know, I think Dr. Amy Acton was fantastic in her approach. I just wish we would have listened to her and not threaten her like we did.
Right. Who in your family has been most affected by the pandemic right now?
I would say my father. He's 82, and he had a heart attack right when the stay-at-home order happened. I think it was the last week of March, beginning of April. And they took him to the hospital in Puerto Rico, and all we wanted was get him what he needs so we can get him out. And we couldn't go there.
Right.
When you have a heart attack, you want your family there. And Carmen, his wife, was the only one that could be there. So we were in constant communication with him. And he was so afraid that he was going to get COVID in the hospital. Thank God he didn't, because there weren't that many cases in the island. It's almost like a little bubble. So there weren't that many cases back then in the island. So he was able to get treated and get discharged. But he doesn't leave the house. And you can hear it. He's a very social human being. And you can hear it that he needs that social interaction. And I just want to fly down there and go and visit him. But it's not safe for me to do that, and the logistics are a nightmare. I'll have to quarantine down there before I can see him. If I see him, I see him with a mask. I want to sit down and have café con leche with him, because that's all we do. We drink coffee all day long, and I want to hug him and give his wife a break that she hasn't had a break ever since the heart attack. So I want to be useful. I don't want to just go there and be seen and just say hi to him. I want to be able to jump in, and I don't think that's possible. So I would say him. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Of course. Do you think that it's easy here in Ohio for the immigrant community, Spanish speaking community, to find information on about COVID and how to take care of themselves? Have we done a good job of caring for minority communities?
I think it's getting better. I think that it was really difficult because it was so confusing and to get everything interpreted and translated. I think that the Latinos that I'm around, they got the information that they needed, and they're taking it very seriously. I'm concerned about the Latinos that do not speak English, that they go to their church, and they're the ones that are connected. They go to church and they get connected with what is happening in the community, and then not being able to go to church because they're afraid. Are they staying out of the loop? Are they getting all the information that they used to get? I know that we have had several phone calls in the community of how to get message to them. Should we communicate with them through WhatsApp? Should we be going to the restaurants and talking to the owners? So those are the things that we have talked about as Latino leaders to get things out there to the community. But I think that it was really difficult because everybody was scrambling. I think everybody was scrambling to get the information, to absorb it themselves. And then to think about, wait a minute, there's a lot of people here that do not have the resources that we do, and they're the essential workers, and they're the ones that are working in the factories, and they're the ones going to the homes doing the cleaning, and they're the ones that are in the hotels cleaning the rooms. And what are we doing to protect them? They're the ones you're working in a restaurant, it's 100 degrees back there, you can't wear a mask. How are you gonna wear a mask? You pass out. So what are we doing to protect them? Are we putting filters for them? What are we doing as a restaurant? So those are the things that I don't think that we did to tell them, hey, you need to advocate for yourself.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up, the church as a place of information, right? A lot of, especially Spanish speakers, that maybe are not bilingual, they go to church and that's where they receive a lot of information on what's going on, but the church closed down.
Yes.
And that left them maybe more vulnerable, right, to accessing information they could not.
Absolutely. And if they have different generations in their household, the younger generation, not the school age, but the younger generation that is starting to work, that are in their 20s and 30s, they, at that age, I felt like I was invincible. So all I'm thinking is like, what are we going to do Friday night? So I don't think they were protecting themselves. So they could be bringing it home into their other family members, didn't knowing that they were bringing them in. And the older family members didn't know, wait a minute, are they bringing it to the house? You think everybody's taking care of themselves, but it's just, there's so many multi-generational families that I don't think that we have done a good job comprehensively sitting down with the family and say, okay, for abuela, this is what we need to do. For mami, que tiene todos los nenes, que tiene que ir a trabajar, esto es lo que mami tiene que hacer cuando vaya a trabajar y cuando regrese. Los nenes, esto es lo que hay que hacer con los nenes. Yo no creo que hemos tenido esa conversación, or that we haven't even started having them. I hope that we have, but I don't have the knowledge that we are doing that.
Lisa, you've mentioned several things that you've been able to do throughout your many years of now living here in Ohio, going to school, education, that family, raising a family. Can you think of what the proudest moment of your life here in Ohio has been so far?
I keep thinking of the boys, and just being able to give birth to these two boys and trying to teach them how to be good citizens. I was always afraid of having children. when you're a social worker, you are aware of how easy it is to mess up a human being. And that was always my fear. I didn't want to bring human beings into the world and be the one responsible for not providing the environment for them to be good citizens and contribute to society. So I would say that I'm the most proud of the way that I'm raising the kids, and the way that my husband is such an amazing father, and that we are such a good team. I'm super proud of that. My family, yeah.
What does Ohio mean to you?
It's home. It's home. It's hard for me to say that because I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is like, it's my place. But when I'm in Puerto Rico and I'm visiting and I'm having the time of my life, it feels like an arm is missing. And then when I get to Ohio, I'm like, oh, it's good. Okay, I'm back home. But then I'm here and I'm like, it feels like an arm is missing. So then when I go home, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. So it's two homes. Ohio is my primary home and Puerto Rico is my secondary home, I guess. I am so proud to be here.
Lisa, is there anything else you would like to add about your life or your experiences here in Ohio for us today?
I want to add that, especially in the city of Columbus and in the Latino community, that I have been able to meet, because I haven't. It was by chance that I met one Cuban girl that introduced me to the Latino community. That was Lourdes, and I had been in Columbus for 10 plus years before I actually started engaging with Latinos. Like, I had my Colombian friends, but that's it. There was no Puerto Ricans or Dominicans or anybody from an island that I knew about. And I think once I met her and became involved with the Latina Mentoring Academy, I was able, as a mentor, I was able to really discover and feel that I could be a leader within the community. Before, I was like, I'm just a leader as a social worker, and to be able to be part of that and realize that I was given the opportunity to teach younger generations about contributing to the community. I would say that that is the best thing that I have found out in Columbus, and I love it. I don't think many cities have that, so I'm very lucky to be here.
Lisa, thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. I truly appreciate it. This is great.
Sí. Una puertorriqueña orgullosa.
Gracias. Gracias.